everybody. Welcome back to the Boss Hole Chronicles. This is your co-host, Sarah Best, and I am flying solo this week because my partner in crime and co-host and best buddy, John Brower, is out on the road. He's got a couple of speaking engagements this week talking about reinventing the manager. But wow, I have a great episode for you today. It's special. I'd like to introduce our guest. Today, we're going to be talking to Michael McFall. Mike is the co-CEO of Biggby Coffee. If you live in Ohio or Michigan or anywhere surrounding those areas, you probably are very familiar with Biggby Coffee. If you're like me, you've been an avid fan for at least 2 decades. Biggby Coffee is so great. But Mike's written 2 books. Actually, his first book, published in 2019, called Grind, really chronicled his story about becoming a business owner from a humble barista. And it's a great story about what it takes to get a business off the ground. You know, the grind and the grit and all the things you have to do, to get a business going. And it creates a great roadmap for that. His most recent book, Grow, which was published in June of this year, is really more about sustainability. So once you've built this business, you're starting to rock and roll. How do you sustain it? And his answer to that is leadership. You'll find that he's very passionate about leadership. He's going to share some personal stories, give us some key tips from his book. I think one of the things I took away from today is just how possible it is for us to adapt and adjust our natural drives. Mike's been the kind of guy who could get stuff done. He's been wildly successful from a business perspective, but he gets it. He understands that it's about people and purpose, and there's so much in today's episode, so let's get to it.
The Boss Hole Chronicles are brought to you by real.good.ventures, a talent optimization firm helping organizations diagnose their most critical people and execution issues with world-class analytics. Make sure to check out all the resources in the show notes and be sure to follow us and share your feedback. Enjoy today's episode.
So Mike, welcome to the Boss Hole Chronicles. Thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the opportunity.
I can tell this is going to be a fun interview. As we know, you are the co-founder, co-creator of Biggby Coffee, which has been one of the fastest growing coffee enterprises, franchise enterprises in the country. Revenues up to or north of 350 million, 350 plus locations. I'm pretty sure I visited at least 100 of those, I hope. Everywhere I go and I see a Biggby Coffee, I'm so there. We have a lot to learn from you today, Mike. You are not only a business owner, a very successful entrepreneur. You're passionate about leadership. You've written 2 books. There'll be a third coming sometime soon. The first book really was talking about your path to successful business ownership. And you did it kind of in a unique way. Would you just give us a couple minutes on how you got started and what was unique about what you didn't do to become a business owner?
Sure. Yeah. I never really had designs on being a business owner. That wasn't really part of what where I was headed. I was at Michigan State University working on a very specific research project. I was headed back to go to school, go back to graduate school and getting prepared for that. And I was most likely in my mind at that point going to become an academic. My mom was an academic. She worked at Michigan State as a professor for many, many years. And then my dad was an entrepreneur. And so anyway, I was in East Lansing and working on this project. And I just happened to stroll into Biggby and apply for a job because I just needed a little extra money. The research gig was only like 20 hours a week. So I got involved with that first store as a barista. And, my partner and I, we didn't know each other. He worked the closing shift. I worked the opening shift. And we came together sort of interview style because he wanted to talk to me about becoming a manager in the business. We ended up popping up that afternoon, going for a long walk around East Lansing, like a 4-hour walk. At the end of that walk, we shook hands, agreed to become business partners and form a new entity, which would be the entity that we would use to grow the brand and grow the concept, Biggby Coffee. And so, I like to tell people it didn't take a rocket scientist to see what was going on in coffee in 1996 when this happened. And, and at the same time, my partner was doing things very, very differently in the coffee space. And so, yeah, I shook his hand. I said yes, and he and I have been working together every single day since.
Yeah.
And we've been growing the business.
That is incredible. The first book you wrote, Grind, published in 2019, it says a no bullshit approach to take your business from concept to cash flow. And I think it's really a powerful roadmap for anybody who wishes to own and grow a business of any size. And what's so great about that is you reach tremendous success. It sounds like you have a great relationship with your business partner. You didn't have the guidebook for how to do this. You figured it out as you went along. Is that true?
Yeah, and grind was one of my anxieties about writing these books, or writing any book at this stage, is that I worry about advice I give today based on where I am from a development standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
To somebody who's an entrepreneur and just getting started. And so I tried to, my goal was to write Grind from the perspective of startup, capture the startup ethos, the mentality you need. And that was what I tried to do. And then, the second book, so that's supposed to get you to positive cash flow. And then the second book takes you into leadership and what I call sustainability. So it was very intentional, the 2-book series. And well, it's going to be a 3-book series, but the first 2 books it's very, very intentional why I broke them up the way I did.
Well, and I appreciate that. This interview is going to focus more on Grow, your second book, which just came out in June, actually. There I was up in Northern Michigan on vacation with my family, and I stumbled into Biggby Coffee one morning on our walk, and I saw your book, and I thought, wow, this is incredible. I picked up a copy, which you could probably find in many Biggby locations and also online, and we'll put a link to it in the show notes. And I thought, wow, these are timeless principles. And there's a couple I know that you're pretty passionate about. Grow is about building your leadership skills. And so if Grind is about building your startup business, this piece is so focused on how not to be a boss hole, because businesses can grow, businesses can be super successful, but we can hurt people along the way. We can leave bodies in the wake. You didn't do that. So let's zero in on a couple that you and I have talked about here that are important to you. The first one has to do with teams. Tell our listeners about the way you view teams as a foundation.
Well, I think that anything that gets done in the world that is powerful, I call it, when you get epic results, it's always from an assemblage of people coming together, unleashing what I call their inner superpowers and getting, amazing results. And so that is teams, right? And powerful teams are what impact the world dramatically. Very, very little happens in the world without it being part of a team, right? So that's my emphasis, is that's what we need as we transition out of the entrepreneurship phase, where we are bootstrapping, and it's a very chaotic, and so you transition out of that moment, and then you have to transition into becoming a leader. And ultimately, at the end of the day, what a leader does is a leader facilitates other leaders and facilitates a team environment. And at the end of the day, the goal, for me anyway, the goal is, at the end of the day, the team, you can become irrelevant because the team can grow the business. And if you get run over by a bus tomorrow, the business will continue to thrive. And that to me is the ultimate goal that we should all be trying to accomplish in running our businesses. Absolutely.
I agree. For you personally, Mike, what were some of the things that helped you be able to focus more on the team? What things helped you develop or cultivate teams as you grew into your leadership role?
Well, there was a significant moment, probably 2015, 2016. So that I realized in a given afternoon in a meeting that the people that were around me in that room, around that table with me, were some of my primary relationships of my entire lifetime, and were going to be.
Yeah.
And that cracked a huge wall down for me. because, up to that point, I'd always had this big, like brick wall between me as a person and me as a leader. And I thought there was this certain persona I had to be as a leader, which was this, hard charging, laser focused on KPIs, maniacal about financial performance. And that was me. And I'd driven the business, I think, about as far as I could with that mentality.
Gotcha.
And I think it was probably going to I think it was even starting to wobble then. But then I realized that, and it was a long process. We're not talking about a couple of days here. I mean, this was a years long process of me realizing, and the importance of the team being that the team is smarter than you are.
Right. Yeah.
And you have to recognize it and realize that, and you have to step back and then facilitate the team becoming powerful. And it's no longer about you. It's about the team dynamic and what they're creating and what they're doing. That was a huge transition for me.
Oh, it's so nice to hear firsthand, from a real person's experience. I think there are a lot of leaders who can resonate with the driving, the need to drive the results and what we believe and think we should, and even how some people are wired to focus on this stuff. Like, let's go get it. Let's get it across. Let's win,
And one thing I would add is that all the stuff that gets you out of the blocks and into what might be considered a successful startup, I shouldn't say all of it, a great deal of the stuff that makes you successful in that phase,
yes,
is the stuff that gets in the way of becoming an effective leader.
And for many, many small business owners and family-owned businesses and other enterprises that have found their way through the grind, they've been a startup and they're moving. That's such sage advice. So definitely building powerful teams as a foundation. The things that got you out of the blocks to begin with that then became obstacles or challenges in leadership, what are some of those things and what do we do about them?
Well, I think, there's a lot to it. I think that one of the things that I think is super important to understand is that you have to begin to understand how you impact. So I talk about it like this. Self-awareness 1.0 is being able to run a filter and respond in an appropriate way in a given situation.
Okay.
That's like simple self-awareness, right?
Mm-hmm.
Self-awareness 2.0 is beginning to truly understand how you're impacting those around you.
Good.
And you think as a leader, when somebody asks you, you think you can answer that question. I promise you can't. And the only way to get to that information is to ask.
Get feedback.
But the only way you can ask is if you've built a whole bunch of trust in those relationships where people are comfortable bringing you this type of feedback and this kind of information. And so this trust piece, I talk about trust, like trust to me is this, like, I just wrote this today. Trust is the sweet, sweet nectar of good leadership. And I think that, how we get to trust is, that's a huge topic. But one of the things is you have to be incredibly stable as a leader. And for many entrepreneurs who've been through the startup phase, stability is a hard thing to get to because we're so used to, letting our emotions run and being super aggressive and powerful and engaged. And, and it's like, but that all of that gets in the way of your people knowing and understanding who they're going to get when they come to you. Mm-hmm. And I love the phrase, your people should not have to figure out the puzzle, which is you, when they approach you.
I love that.
You've got to be stable. They got to know what they're going to get when they come to you. And to me, that's like step one in this concept of becoming a good, strong, powerful leader, as opposed to a maniacal, controlling entrepreneur.
I think that makes a ton of sense. Don't be the puzzle they have to figure out. Or you said it's something like that.
Yeah.
That's huge. Stability, steadiness, emotional management. I think in your book, you call it emotional stability.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that you don't experience emotions or there aren't significant ups and downs, but it to me, it means that you as a leader develop capability to manage those emotions like emotional intelligence, and you dial in that intensity. So there is steadiness and calm. That's
yeah.
good.
And I think that every interaction you have as a leader, you have to think about what is the ideal outcome for the person you're interacting with. And then you need to facilitate that conversation. So that's the outcome that occurs. It's not about you as the leader. It's about the outcome that that person needs, or the outcome that the two of you think that that person needs. And then your job is to facilitate that outcome happening.
And I'm thinking, gosh, that's not so difficult to understand, but
It's hard to do, though.
It's hard to do
Yeah.
for so many reasons.
Yeah.
But it's a true test. I mean, if you're going to be a leader and you cannot do that, or you're not interested in doing that, it's probably a sign, like not a good job for you.
There
you may
go.
be a boss hole if you're not interested in the outcome for the other person. All right, we'll be right back.
With employee disengagement at its highest level in 9 years, your company can't afford to miss the mark when it comes to optimizing your hiring, management, and team performance practices. At its lowest level, employee turnover costs you $11,000 per person. And those are dollars you can easily save with the right set of people analytics. Real Good Ventures is a talent optimization consultancy specializing in world-class analytics specific to your people and the critical role they play within your organization. Gain confidence in your hiring practices, keep the boss holes from driving your talent away, design your teams for flawless execution, and create a culture that offers meaning and fulfillment. Real Good Ventures has a family of validated diagnostic tools specific to the human aspect of business, because we know that all business issues are people issues. Visit us today at www.realgoodventures.com and bring meaning and fulfillment back into your workplace.
Okay, let's get back to the program. Okay, so what else do you have? Like what got you here won't get you there. What else do we need to look out for?
I got asked a great question last week, and it made me think really hard.
Yeah.
And that was, if you could have every leader in America wake up and read 2 pages of your book every morning before they went to work for 1 year, what 2 pages would they be? And it's the 2 pages in Grow on listening. And I talk about effective communication, and I talk about listening. And to me, we cannot lead. You cannot lead if you are not listening to learn and listening to understand. And it is something that I hear people talk about all the time in the world. And I see so few people being effective at listening. And the reason, we listen to respond. We're letting our own emotions get wrapped up in the listening process. If we just sit, and the question that I love to ask, or I advocate asking, is this: can I repeat back to you what you just said, to make sure I understand that's what you were trying to communicate with me? And then you repeat it back. And oftentimes, at least in my experience, the person will say, well, yeah, but there's this one, they'll correct some stuff, right? In terms of how you reply. One, that makes it, the person now believes that you were actually listening to them, which is a huge step forward, right?
Yes.
But two, you're actually getting the understanding of what they were trying to communicate with you. And so, but good listening, I also note that good listeners, there are long pauses in between conversation. When you see people communicating and there's never a pause, someone's always talking. That is, to me, that's a sign that there's very little listening going on. And all we're doing is we're thinking about what the next thing we're going to say is.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, probably the next thing we're going to say to try to impress that person. But when I watch good listeners, there's these long pauses because they're listening to understand, they're thinking, and they want to make sure the person gets everything out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then so when you come out of listening and you go into a pause, you're really truly just trying to make sure that you understood what the person was saying, but also that they're done.
Yes.
And oftentimes people aren't done. And then we interrupt and we come back with something. And then that spins the conversation. The thing about conversation is that when you engage, you are controlling where that conversation goes as the leader, because people are not going to interrupt you and steer the conversation. So when you engage and you say something or you take it somewhere, the person goes with you because they're, and so making sure that the person has been able to get all the way through their thought is so important.
I'm guilty of that all the time. I'm just so eager, to keep going. And even maybe I'm trying to affirm what the person's saying, but I cut them off. Like I'm talking, I probably did it to you already, talking before you're even done with your thought. But this is really great advice. It takes practice. Have you uncovered, Mike, when it's more difficult for you to listen versus when you find it much easier to say, let me make sure, can I say back what you just said so I make sure I understand it?
Yeah, this was years of work. So I had a moment where somebody, we coined it command and control. And when I went into command and control mode, there was no listening. I was putting my hands firmly on the wheel and I was going to steer and no one was going to get to say a word otherwise. And so, the team noted this behavior. We ended up having a long conversation about it. We got all the way through to the point that I began to understand and they began to understand. When I went into command and control mode, I was scared.
Wow.
And once we uncovered that and that behavior manifested, then it didn't take much for somebody in the group to say, okay, Mike, cool, right? Like you're clearly going into command and control mode. What are you scared of right now? What's causing you this fear, right? And then we could work on that. And generally speaking, and what we found was, with my experience, I mean, I've been in the business forever, right? At 27 years, that when I got scared, there was probably something there that we should be paying attention to. But when I went into command and control mode, I wasn't getting to the point where we were actually understanding what I was scared of and then letting the team work on that. I was just going to solve the problem, right? And so fear for me, and by the way, as a leader, I think it's sometimes difficult to admit you're scared. You're not supposed to be scared as a CEO. You're supposed to have it all under control and you're supposed to be, the BMOC, you got it, right? But guess what? We're all scared. We all are, and it's like, and being able to admit that to my team and my group was powerful. But that fear is what got in the way of me being able to listen. And we were able to work through that. That was probably a year-long sort of engagement around this idea of command and control, which was really powerful and amazing. And like, I don't go into that state anymore.
That's incredible.
Hardly ever.
Well, and so that gives us all hope that, with intentional effort, kind of like going to the gym, picking up the dumbbells, if we do the reps, it becomes definitely more of a pathway in the brain than the default, which is that command and control and the fear.
Yeah.
I think that's such great advice. And by the way, when our listeners pick up the book Grow, you're talking about pages 164 and 165 in the book, where you talk about listening. And those are 2 pages everybody should read each morning before they go into work. It actually goes over to page 166. And what's great is right after that, the next one says asking for help.
Yeah.
And so I'd love you to even take that one a next step.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love this one. Everyone thinks I don't know where I got this too. I should note this because I read it somewhere. This is somebody else's work. This isn't my work,
Okay,
but
fair enough.
you think when you are trying to build a relationship with somebody that by offering to help them is the way that you build a relationship. But it's the exact opposite of that that's actually true. Like how you build a relationship with somebody is by being vulnerable and asking them for a favor, or being vulnerable and asking them for help. And so you're vulnerable, and then you bring them into your world, right? But then they feel great about being able to contribute and being able to be involved with you. And people like if you were to say to me right now, hey, would you be willing to help me with this? I mean, like I'm going to feel good about that. Like I'm going to feel like, hey, you feel comfortable enough asking me, like I can come back and I can support you. And that's how relationships work.
Sure.
And as a leader, I find leaders don't ask for help, especially from the people that work for them. So to say to somebody, hey, this is what's going on for me. I'm having a real struggle with this. I'm wondering if you could maybe help me with this by whatever, and then that person then gets to be like, absolutely, I'd love to help. And then you're building a relationship together. But that, to me, that is a very effective form of communication.
What I love about the two ideas of fear and asking for help together, I think we are universally joined by lived experiences that have created fear in our past. And depending on, what our home situation was like, people have been conditioned to believe and understand that it's not okay to have an emotion or to feel fear. Right. So they have no awareness of it, perhaps. And certainly, you want to, I'll give you something. You crying, I'm going to give you something to cry about. There's that for some people, that sense of, gosh, I cannot be human here. Yeah. I cannot be vulnerable because it's unsafe. But all that to say, what a great twist on this idea of when we're building relationships. Gosh, I just put myself in your shoes. Like, or, if you asked me to help you, I would be thrilled. Of course I'll help you. It does. It makes me feel good. And it's just a great way to engage a person, to understand their gifts and talents. And for those of us that have a hard time delegating either authority or details, that might be a little bit of a challenge. But that's the whole point. You're talking about building people, building a team, getting outside of yourself. And there's a lot more like this in the book, isn't there? There are many other leadership principles like this.
I hope, yes, I hope so. I think so. We've covered like 2 or 3 smaller pieces, and there's just a ton more, but this is my, this is everything I've got in relation to leadership is in that book, and so I am, I'm going to be working hard in the coming years to try to help build more powerful leadership teams out there, because I think that if we can do that, then we can start to take on our biggest challenges. And if we have such a dearth in leadership, nothing gets done, right. And so anyway, I'm excited about this work. I love it. It's my passion.
Well, and it's powerful, simple, yet, very impactful advice. I love the way you've written the book. It's easy to read. It's easy to digest. We agreed, you and I, before we hit record today, that it's not easy to do necessarily, but right. we can get our head and our arms around it. Thanks to you for that. And yeah, you're taking what has been an incredible impact, growing this great enterprise called Biggby Coffee. And now you're sharing that playbook, both for business growth and for leadership growth with the rest of the world. You're doing that through speaking engagements. We'll definitely put a link to your website where people can find your books, your LinkedIn profile. What's coming down the pike for you then? And we know you're going to be you're out there on the road. You got your show on the road. What might be coming next for you?
Well, I got 4 kids. So
hey.
yeah. No, I
that's awesome.
So that is awesome. I've got little ones too. So that takes up a lot of my world. But I think for me, I really want to be deliberate about getting this message, the message from Grow, out into the world. And then, my third book is, okay, so now here we are. We've built our companies to be where we are irrelevant as the leaders, meaning the team's running it, the team's got it. There's an assumption there that it's a pretty significant enterprise. And so now here you are, you're quote unquote successful entrepreneur, and you have all the resources in the world. You have all the connections in the world. You can call anybody and they'll return your phone call. Now what? It can't be about your third home in Aspen and a private plane and your 4 country club memberships.
Right. Wow.
It's got to be more than that.
Sure.
And so the third book that I aspire to write is going to be a call to action about, I believe that private enterprise is the most powerful force on the planet. And if we're going to change and improve the human condition, the people that are in the best position to do that are people that have built successful enterprises and have those resources behind them. And, publicly traded companies can't do it because they got a bunch of a-holes looking over their shoulders, making sure they don't spend a dime on anything other than trying to make themselves more money. Right. So anyway.
Yeah. Well,
it's my social commentary for the day.
We'll take it. That's all right. But I agree with you. This is where the leverage is. So we'll eagerly anticipate with eagerness, or we'll be excited about your next book. And may I just say, I know our listeners will want to hear from you firsthand when your book is ready to go. If we could extend an invitation, I was going to say, thanks for returning my call. If we could extend an invitation to have you back, that would be incredible.
Yeah, I'd love it. It's years out, right? I've got to write the thing, and then it's a long process. But I'm really excited about landing this stuff from Grow now. For a few years.
Yes.
I'll start writing the next one, and then we'll go from there. But of course, whenever you want, I'm happy to come back.
Yeah. Well, Mike, this has been a really enjoyable conversation. I'm very much inspired by the Biggby story, by your story, by what you've now put together as a great guide for leaders, a roadmap, certainly for businesses that wish to grow, but also now, hey, if you're gonna have this establishment, how are you going to do it in a way that enlivens and engages your people and makes a difference for people? And that's really the focus. It's about relationships with you. I love that.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So with that, we'll say thank you so much for being here today. And folks, we'll see you next time on the Boss Hole Chronicles.
We'd like to thank our guest today on the Boss Hole Chronicles. And if you have a Boss Hole Chronicles story of your own, please email us at mystory@thebossholechronicles.com. Once again, mystory@thebossholechronicles.com. We'll see you again soon.